Hi, my name is Nick Brown. I am a researcher here at IU. Today, I'll discuss my paper, Fear as a Complex Emotion, explaining the dual emotions of fear and irritation and explaining security coping behaviors. I am a behavioral scientist, and I have three streams of research. The first one is cybersecurity. The second one is privacy. And the third one is market manipulations associated with exploitative systems such as gamified information systems that are deployed to modify people's behaviors, or dark patterns that are deployed to modify people's behaviors and to make them make suboptimal decisions. Specifically, my main interest is cybersecurity, and what motivated me to delve into this research area is personal experience. For example, before I matriculated into my doctoral program, I had to move to campus, and I was looking for rentals that I could possibly rent. And I noticed that I was continually being rejected, apartment complex after apartment complex after apartment complex, and I was curious. I was wondering, why is this happening? So my first year, I had to buy a house instead of renting a house. And then later on, towards the end of my second year, which is during the pandemic, I received a class action lawsuit notice. And on that notice, it mentioned that RealPage was going to be sued. And RealPage is a tenant screening company. And I put two and two together. I found out that RealPage, with their databases, anytime an apartment was screening a tenant, they would type in a specific name, such as mine, Nicholas Brown, and the database would just aggregate all the Nicholas Browns. And if there was one bad Nicholas Brown that was deserving of a rejection, then all the Nicholas Browns were rejected. And I realized this concept of statistical discrimination, where people and their data can be aggregated, and people at the group level, whenever someone looks at that group level aggregated data, can make a decision from there, which is statistical discrimination. And after seeing that and experiencing it, I wanted to learn how to protect my own data so that I wasn't being statistically discriminated against, which is the reason why I delved into this foray of cybersecurity and privacy being ways to protect your own information, and cybersecurity being ways to safeguard your digital assets. And so they were just a harmonious pair to delve into those. This required my reading extensive literature. At the same time that I was working on this project, I was also working on a meta-analysis where I had to read through 500 papers related to behavioral cybersecurity. And I noticed a recurring trend. And then the recurring trend was many of the information system security researchers were investigating fear as a motivator to compel people to protect their digital assets or to adhere or comply with some type of security policy or warning. And with this fear, it was hypothesized that fear would lead people to this danger control path. And the danger control path means that people would, because of this high level of fear, and if they have high efficacy, that they would take the necessary actions to protect themselves against the threat. However, there's also an alternative path, which is emotion-focused coping or emotion control path. And this is where people, if they experience too high of fear, that it will cause them to tend to their emotions. And when they tend to their emotions, they may react affectively, or they may avoid a specific threat. And through the literature that I was reading, the research that I was reading, I noticed that fear was not a good predictor of emotion-focused coping, but it was a terrific predictor for protection-focused coping. So putting two and two together, I said there must be some alternative emotion that's concurrently ongoing that's causing people to react maladaptively to these threats, and I wanted to investigate what that was. And eventually, after numerous studies, after numerous engaged scholarship being where I go out to the people and ask them, here's a security notification, what's the first emotion that you experience when you see this? And I noticed that people said, oh, I've seen this before. McAfee provides it. There's scareware. There's bad actors that provide these notifications. I get irritated. I experience annoyance. And then I started thinking, oh, wait, maybe those are dual emotions that are occurring concurrently. how can I hypothesize that these emotions can be combined together? Because with existing research, researchers investigated fear as a basic emotion, we wanted to find out if there was this concurrent complex emotion that could occur. And we built off of Plutchik's 1980 Wheel of Emotions, where Plutchik describes 8 different discrete emotions: happiness, sadness, joy, fear, anger, and so forth. And we noticed that when you combine certain emotions, such as fear and disgust creates shame, or fear and anxiety creates a different emotion, we wanted to see whether fear and irritation could combine into a complex emotion. So we hypothesized that fear should not be modeled as a basic emotion, that it should be modeled as a complex emotion. And hence our research question was, can fear as a complex emotion be used to predict more effectively than fear as a basic emotion, problem-focused coping and emotion-focused coping? The methodology was highly rigorous. We built this prolific endpoint management system. And inside the endpoint management system, we embedded 2 specific tasks in there: a reading task and a writing task. And with these tasks, and then also a gaming task, with these tasks, we created authentic, realistic security notifications that would inspire or conjure fear or irritation. And after doing that and collecting the data, we realized that our artifact was sufficient in allowing us to interrogate our research question. Thereafter, we had to perform the traditional statistical approaches. We performed the regressions, the ANOVAs. So this was a highly rigorous methodology that did take us 3 or 4 years just to get it right before we can collect an opportune data sample. With this endpoint management system, we made it so that it was task aware. We embedded, again, 2 tasks inside there. The first task was a hedonic task. This hedonic task was a game, and it was similar to the brick breaker game or Arkanoid game, where there's a paddle board, and then there's a ball that bounces off of the paddle board, and users had to move the paddle to break each of the bricks. That was the first task. The second task was reading an AI article, and after reading the AI article, they were asked a quiz. And we did not, in our experimental design in our study, we did not apprise or notify participants that they would receive a security notification. We asked them to just evaluate the specific app and the task and to provide us with their feedback. So we used a form of deception that was IRB approved. And with these 2 embedded tasks, we had to create a security it's something called fear appeal, a security notification. And with the design of our security notification, we had to go through multiple iterations of vignette validity, where we spoke with subject matter experts to look at our fear appeal, the design of our security notification, to ensure that it would elicit the correct amount of fear. We put our participants in the correct conditions. We were able to analyze our results. And what we found is going to be our theoretical contribution, which is in line with existing research. We found that fear as a basic emotion is a fantastic predictor of problem-focused coping. And problem-focused coping is going to be adaptive coping, where people focus on mitigating the problem at hand. So for example, if they receive a threat on their phone, and that's a problem, they're going to take the necessary due diligence and actions to remove that threat. Problem-focused coping, whereas emotion-focused coping is where people don't respond to the problem, they avoid the problem, they leave the problem, they click out of the specific task. So that's avoidance, or they react against it. We found that fear as a basic emotion will successfully predict problem-focused coping, and also in line with existing research, fear as a basic emotion is a subpar predictor of emotion-focused coping. And so when we combined fear as a complex emotion with irritation, we found that based upon the way that we operationalized our fear and irritation, first of all, cannot be combined to create a new emotion. They are diametric emotions, meaning that fear cannot coexist with irritation because one of them has to be dominant. And this is going to be based upon Plutchik's wheel of emotion. So if one of these are dominant, we created a discriminant value score. And this discriminant value score, where we standardized the fear responses and the irritation responses, we were able to determine whether fear was more dominant at that time or whether irritation was more dominant. And we created a dummy variable. By creating a dummy variable, we were able to put the participant in the fear dominant state or irritation dominant state. And we found that those who are in the fear dominant state, they were more attuned or more likely to engage in problem-focused coping, which is the adaptive response that was in line with literature. But when we focused on those who were irritation dominant, we found that irritation dominance was a great predictor, was a stronger predictor actually than not only fear as a basic emotion on EFC or emotion-focused coping, but we found that irritation in general was more significant in predicting EFC, emotion-focused coping, rather than fear dominant predicting problem-focused coping. So this is our theoretical contribution that we're going to make towards science, that fear, because of its complexity and the ability for people to experience more than just one discrete emotion, researchers are going to have to think through what's the possible range of emotions that people can experience that's going to allow them to make optimal decisions in the face of some type of threat, some type of social engineering threat, or some type of technical threat that was embedded into their system. Ways that we as security researchers can provide better security notifications is to perhaps embed in our mobile security apps. So for example, if there's Lookout's an example. If Lookout is installed on our mobile devices and Lookout must screen through our possible vulnerabilities, it behooves those types of mobile security applications to provide notifications not in the middle of a primary task, but perhaps to embed some type of context-aware or task-aware algorithm into their notification system such that the notifications appear on users' home screens. So perhaps after a user performs their specific task, whether it's listening to music, whether it's sending an email, sending a text message, after they go back to the home screen, that's going to be the most opportune time to present the security notification, because when the security notification is provided to them, when they have this homeostasis, they're neither going to be fearful nor irritated, and then they'll be able to make some type of judgment call that is most likely going to be better than if you interrupted their specific task and they completely disregard the security notification, or they completely exit out, or they forget to come back to it to handle that security threat. The main motivation to delve into mobile security is because it serves as a gateway into understanding security on IoT devices. And now we see that there are more augmented reality glasses and devices that are being deployed. So I feel that the future research areas will pertain to protecting those devices, the augmented reality. And if that's the case, then what we would want to do is, especially if we're going to collaborate with outside researchers or perhaps with the NSF, National Science Foundation, we would want to determine if there is mass wide web adoption of these devices and they become they become new threat vectors or points of vulnerability, what types of defenses should we bolster? Not necessarily technical defenses, but the socio-technical aspect of it. Because I am a behavioral researcher, not only can you embed these different types of technical defenses into those Apple Vision Pros, the metal goggles, but how will people react to them? Especially because just adopting those headsets is something entirely new, let alone the software packages that are going to be included in there. So we would want to get a head start on implementing best practice designs to present security notifications. And that was one of the many reasons why I delved into the mobile security realm. In terms of advice to burgeoning junior scholars, my recommendation would be to read, read, read. Because as I mentioned earlier, if you want to design artifacts, build systems, yes, we can jump right into it and build something, deploy it to see how people will react to it. So perhaps do a split A/B testing. However, as a researcher, we have limited time and we have limited budgets. So we don't have too many resources and the time to continually receive a stream of behavioral data or consumer feedback to understand how we can update or improve our system. So what behooves us is to get everything right the first time. And that's going to require us to delve into the literature and understand what are those scientific gaps. What have existing researchers developed or built or theorized? And we have to understand that were there any limitations in what they propose? Not limitations as something malicious or bad regarding the science, but what types of phenomena would we be interested in investigating that we didn't quite understand or that was not fully addressed in the previous line of literature? And it really only takes time and experience in reading through the panoply of studies to understand what are those novel areas that I can delve into. In terms of reaching out to me, I do practice what I preach. So I am a privacy researcher. And because I experienced statistical discrimination in the past, where my data were aggregated and there was decision making at a group level rather than looking at the individual level, I try to keep a sparse digital footprint. So I do not have social media. I have a LinkedIn, but that's for professional purposes. But what I intend to do is to create an IU blog so that I can convey my research findings to the general public. So the research blog will be blogs.iu.edu, and it'll be my username, nickb15. And that's going to be a future endeavor later on. And that's going to be the best way to understand the types of research, whether market manipulation, cybersecurity, or privacy, the types of research that I'm generating. That's going to be the best means to see what I'm cooking and what I'm creating. Oh, yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.